We're on lesson 2 of chapter 2, which is adding integers. First, we're going to add integers using absolute value. Then we're going to evaluate expressions with integers. Then we'll solve a real-world problem. If you remember our previous lesson, integers can be either positive or negative values, or values and their opposites. And a good way to think about adding integers is to think about like a game show, for example, such as like Jeopardy! In Jeopardy! If you get a question right, you get the value of the score. But if you get a question wrong, you get the opposite of that value, or the negative of that value. So for example, if Dr. Smith got the first question wrong, he would have negative 500 points. But if he gets that second question right, he gets to add a value of 600. Now, a mistake that many people do is when they think that they add this together, they see a 500 and a 600, and they would give an answer like 1100. That would not be correct, because you got to remember that this is a negative value. It's the opposite of 500. With this positive 600, 500 of those points is going to get us back to the value of 0, and then there'll be 100 left over, which will be Dr. Smith's score after getting that second score right. Which would be Dr. Smith's score after getting that second question right. Let's use a number line to expand on this a little more. So if we had the value of negative 3, and we were adding the opposite of 5, or negative 5. Adding a negative is only going to make things worse, kind of like when we had this Jeopardy! Problem here. So as we add that negative, we're not going to be going upwards in value to the right. We're actually going to go to the left, downward in value. And it's going to be 5 spots. So starting at negative 3, adding 5 puts us at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now our value is going to be negative 8. Let's look at this next one, 4 plus negative 7. So our starting value is 4, and now we're adding a negative 7. So since we're adding a negative value, that's going to be a bad value again. We're going to be heading to the left. We're adding the opposite of positive 7. So therefore, negative is going to move us this direction again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which puts us down to negative 3. So if you scored 4 points and then you get negative 7 points, you end up with negative 3 for your score. Now we're going to add integers using absolute value. We learned about absolute value last lesson, so if you're unsure of that, I'd suggest checking that out before moving on. But for this problem, we're going to work with negative 7 plus a negative 4. Notice that we have the negative 4 in parentheses because we're not subtracting 4, we're adding a negative 4, or adding the opposite of 4. You'll notice that we have a negative number and a negative number. And whenever we're adding numbers of the same sign, meaning both negative or both positive, we find the sum or total of the absolute values and then keep the sign that they have. So if these red chips represented negative numbers, we can count up all the negative numbers and then keep the sign. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 would be the value. And since we're keeping the sign, it's going to be negative 11. For this next one, we have negative 8 plus a positive 6. And you'll notice this time it's different. We have a negative and a positive. When you have a different sign, you need to find the difference of the absolute values and then keep the sign of the higher value. The higher value is the sign that stays. So we have a negative 8, a positive 6. These green chips count for positive. So how many more negatives do we have than positive? It looks like these all line up perfectly, meaning we have 2 extra negative values. So 2 is our difference, and then we're keeping the negative sign because the negative had the higher value. Let's try this with some expressions. We have evaluate a plus b, for a is 6 and b equals negative 10. So if we replace the a with the 6 and the b with a negative 10, we could rewrite this here. So a is now 6 plus b is negative 10. So in parentheses, I'm going to put negative 10. So think about this with absolute value. The signs are different, so we need to find the difference between the two values. The 10 is the bigger absolute value, so 10 minus 6 is 4. The negative has a bigger sign than the positive, so it's going to be negative 4. Now we have x plus y, for x is negative 42 and y is positive 71. So we have negative 42 instead of x, and then it's plus, and then 71 instead of y. And look, the signs are once again different. We have a negative, we have a positive, so we need to find the difference between these two. The 71 is bigger than the 42 by 29. And since the positive number is bigger than the negative number, we're going to say this is positive 29. Let's look at a real-world problem. It says the math team's income from the car wash was $300, including tips. Supply expenses were $25. Use integer addition to find the team's total profit or loss. So we're trying to figure out how much money they made. Well, we saw that they made a total of $300. So that's a positive 300, that's a good 300. But they also spent $25 at the store for supplies. So if you're going to add a negative value of 25, and we'll put that negative 25 in parentheses. So here I have a value that is positive, and I'm adding a value that is negative, meaning that the signs are different. When the signs are different, we need to find the difference between the absolute values. So 300 minus 25 would be 275. And since the positives have a bigger value, this is going to be positive $275.